Thank you. Hello and welcome to the Daily Radio Show with your host, Stewart Jon. It's March 2nd, 1903, and boy, do we have one hell of a show for you today. As many of you know, just a few months ago, our beloved President Teddy Bear called for a ceasefire with the Philippines after an exhausting 3-year conflict. Today, we have with us General Elwell Otis, who was in command of the 8th Corps during the war and also in charge of the U.S. Army during the notable Battle of Manila in 1899. To talk about the war and answer some of the questions many of us have been scrutinizing over the past few years. And now, let me introduce you to my esteemed colleague, Glenn Jefferson, who's going to be interviewing General Otis.
Howdy, General. How's it hanging?
I'm good, Glenn.
I doubt the Philippines are feeling the same way, pig.
What?
Anyway, naturally, seeing as the war was met with a flurry of opposition, most notably from the Anti-Imperialist League, many of us have our qualms regarding the actual motive behind the invading Philippines. So, how was the heartless pillaging of Philippines?
That's a great question, Glenn. As the war is already over, I'll try to be as honest about this topic as possible. As you're probably aware of, the United States did not simply wake up one morning and decide to become an imperial power. Instead, the invasion of the Philippines stemmed from a strong economic interest in the nation. And to be honest, we were hoping to capitalize on the fact that Spain could no longer afford to retain it as one of their main colonies. Also, seeing the Philippines was experiencing an independence of their own, our intent was to exploit this and use it as a ruse in which we would disguise our ulterior, more economically focused motives from the outward appearance that we were there to help, although we did to a certain extent. We did not initially anticipate the brute retaliation the Filipino army in the Katipunan put up.
Interesting. So we were essentially exploiting a bunch of vulnerable Oriental farmers, experiencing a grueling independence of their own, in an attempt to make dough. Reminds me of that time I stole Johnny's marbles back in first grade.
Well, when you put it like that, it sounds rather harsh. We didn't just go there to make money, although our primary concern was securing capital. We were also trying to keep up with the other colonial greats, such as Great Britain, France, and Portugal, through neo-colonialism. That is, controlling a nation via capitalism, globalization, and global forces in lieu of a heavy military presence. We also, as a collective, felt it was our duty to teach the Filipinos proper religion, educate them, and to teach them how to farm and build.
So you're saying a main reason for invading the Philippines was, in fact, an attempt to show our counterparts who's boss?
To a certain extent, yes.
Sounds mindless competitive to me. How do you personally feel about the invasion? Do you think it was justified? Because you seem rather unfazed by the idea of taking a nation from behind, if you know what I mean.
I do, Glenn. Keep in mind, I am a general, so my response may seem biased, but I feel that it was essential for us to invade and secure the Philippines. Not only do I agree with the economic motive, but as I mentioned before, we needed to teach the Filipinos proper religion, educate them, and to teach them how to be subsistent.
Okay, so how do you feel about all these haters hating on this war?
I can certainly understand where all the unrest was coming from. Unfortunately, much of the opposition was brought about by scores of so-called yellow journalists, who took to littering the scene with heinous fabrications regarding the war in order to sell their material. An example of some of the fallacies told by the president was the U.S. had run out of frontier and needed more land. If the U.S. didn't, others would expand onto it. The era was a time of previously unheard of dissent and unrest, coming from both the agrarian and industrial sectors, in the form of granges and farmer alliances and labor unions. With the frequency of strikes and related violence increasing in the U.S., there seemed to be a growing demand for a social revolution. However, what many people didn't realize that a foreign market represented more work for them, and customers for their agricultural and industrial products. For most people, this war would benefit them greatly due to a new outlet for international business.
Okay, so you're right. Invading and taking control of the Philippines does create many jobs for people and is overall an economic stimulus. However, it is in no way justify the massacre of innocent lives.
In no circumstances is the loss of innocent lives justifiable. But in this case, while trying to help a country incapable of self-rule, we were met with fighting on the part of Filipino nationalists led by Emilio Aguinaldo. With an attempt and fail to fight us in a conventional war, Aguinaldo soon figured out that his Filipino troops were no match for our better trained and equipped soldiers. Switching to guerrilla-style warfare, these Filipino fighters would torture our soldiers as well as turn on their own people, terrorizing them if they cooperated with our forces. Many civilians also met their demise not only from the fighting, but from cholera and malaria epidemics, as well as food shortages due to several agricultural disasters during this time.
So what you're saying is that your initial intention was to free the Philips from the Spain and help them earn their independence, but you've already molested their army and freed them from the Spanish. I mean, did you meet a girl in the Philippines? What is your motive for continuing to stay?
Like I've said numerous times before, although we've ceased war with the Filipino army, our work here isn't done, as we are trying to help the Filipinos. It is our duty to teach them how to live. Our duty was to rehabilitate and set up the people in their country for self-government, introduce a few social reforms as well as plans to develop and help their struggling economy.
To be honest, Otis, you seem rather disillusioned. And quite honestly, I think you may have been dropped on your head as a child. And it's for this reason I'd love to press you more. But unfortunately, we're running out of time. Back to you, Stewart.
Well, that guy seemed like a nut job. Thanks, Glenn, for that insightful interview.